Hello? Are we there, Pastor McClurkin?
I'm right here, sir, right here.
Well, it is a delight. We want to welcome everyone to this forum today. It is very necessary, and we want you to pay close attention to the things that you're about to hear. It is of such magnitude that I felt it necessary for Pastor McClurkin to join me. We both have questions. We both want answers, and we want those that are under our shepherd to benefit from what is going on. This has been a world pandemic, and the world is yet looking for answers. And so, Pastor McClurkin, what do you have to say?
Well, it's important that we have understanding and that we know the truth. There are so many questions that need to be answered or at least addressed concerning this vaccine. And I believe that today is going to separate the fact from the fiction, the pros from the con, and we'll be able to get past the controversy and into some real information that will give people pause or ease to be able to make a decision concerning receiving the vaccine. And I'm sure with the group of people that we've got and the array of expertise that we've got set up, we're going to hear some information that's going to be very helpful. So we're not coming in with closed minds. We're coming in
right.
ears
Yes.
to be able to hear,
Yes.
to process this in this pandemic. It's very important. And the people that we've got, the quality and caliber of people that we are going to be able to speak to today, are going to give us answers that we've long wanted to hear.
Okay. And what I want everyone to do right now is to share.
Yes.
I want you to share, hit that share button, and let's get as many folk involved as we can. I'm happy to say that I talked to my mother this morning, and she's invited a friend up, so they're sharing right now because it's very important. And as Pastor McClurkin mentioned, we have some very capable people. I want to introduce you to the twin sister docs. They are Dr. Delana Wardlaw and Dr. Elena McDonald. And we had a discussion as to why parents make their children's name rhyme when they're twins. We still don't know, but they hail from North Philadelphia. Dr. Delana Wardlaw is a board-certified family medicine physician with Temple University. And Dr. Elena McDonald is a board-certified pediatrician, chief medical officer, and owner of 3 Philadelphia-based outpatient practices. They are both graduates of Temple University and Penn State Medical School and have been working in Philadelphia and the surrounding areas for over 20 plus years. As motivational speakers, medical consultants, and media consultants, they use various platforms to educate and address health care disparities. They created the Twin Sister Docs platform to promote health, wellness, and self-advocacy from marginalized communities, including the African American and Latinx population. Their mission is to provide culturally sensitive and accurate medical information using the 3 T's, trusted messages that translates to action leading to transformational outcomes. So both have received numerous awards and accolades for their medical and volunteer work by their peers and the community, including the 2020 Pennsylvania Family Physician of the Year for Dr. Wardlaw and the Pennsylvania Medical Society's Everyday Hero Award for Dr. McDonald. Would you please welcome the twin sister docs, Dr. Delana Wardlaw and Dr. Elena McDowell.
Wonderful, wonderful.
How are you?
We are well. Thank you for having us.
And as you can see, they are identical twins. And I found out that Dr. Delana is the younger twin. So according to African history, she is the eldest twin.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Pastor. Just for
Well,
today.
welcome, and we're going to get involved. Pastor McClurkin, you have another doctor that you want to
Yes,
introduce.
it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Anthony Clark. Dr. Clark is one of Detroit's most popular and talented physicians. Dr. Clark is an internal medicine specialist, and he attended and graduated from Wright State University School of Medicine with residencies in internal medicine and pediatrics in Wayne State University. Dr. Clark is affiliated with many hospitals, including Detroit Receiving Hospital, Harbor University Hospital, Sinai Grace Hospital, and St. John Hospital. And with over 33 years of diverse experience, Dr. Anthony Clark also cooperates with other doctors and physicians in medical groups, including Healthcare's Detroit Foundation Incorporated. So please help us welcome this wonderful monogene, Dr. Anthony Clark.
He's coming on. We have faith that he's going to appear.
Come on here now. There
he is. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, sir.
And we discussed earlier, and he originates from Flint, Michigan. So he's an original Flintstone.
I am a Flintstone, yes.
And we're happy to have him here. Pastor McClurkin, you have one more of our guests that's going to join us for this discussion.
Well, this sister I know very well, and I've known her for decades. And I thank God for her being a part of this conversation as an advocate. Her name is Janan Healey. Janan.
There we go.
Healey. And Janan attended Eastern Michigan University with focus on communications and became passionate in advocating for parental rights for over 18 years. Her passion led to a world of research with interests in medicine, parental empowerment, and community activism. These quests opened the opportunity for her to serve on a panel for parentalrights.org. Janan has been married to my brother Andre Healey for 21 years. And she's the mother of two amazing young men. And I mean, they are amazing. Amir and Arman. So I want you to welcome this wonderful woman, Madam Janan Healey.
Hello.
God bless you, beautiful.
Hi, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're going to dive right into this. We have people, and again, I want you all to share. Someone just texted and said that they are from Virginia, but they went to Temple University. And so we'll have all of that going on throughout this conversation today. Let's talk about it. The coronavirus, as we know it, has been a pandemic for a year. We just celebrated 1 year here in America.
Mm-hmm.
I want to deal with some of the statistics and the data that we're looking at. But before we get into the numbers, I would like Dr. Clark, I'll start with you. Tell us how it has been in the field. You've been in medicine for some time. How has this pandemic differed from what you've seen during the years of your practice?
It has been overwhelming. It definitely has something we've never seen before, something that we've never dealt with before. And unlike other parts of medicine, something we didn't have tools to deal with. So we have, as I tell people, with this disease, we basically were building the plane while we were flying. We were learning. We had a steep learning curve as far as what the disease was, how it affected people, how it presented. Our initial evaluations of how it presented were totally wrong. We initially thought it was more of a respiratory. Then we found out that it presented in other ways, as far as GI, as far as all kind of different ways, as far as loss of taste and smell. Some people have minor disease, some people have severe diseases. And initially, Detroit was hit the hardest, probably I would say in March and April of last year. And hospitals were overwhelmed, as well as a lot of physicians. And so it was overwhelming. It took us aback. We're usually, as physicians, more equipped and ahead of the curve. On this one, we were trying to catch up the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Elena, same question.
Yes, from a pediatric standpoint, we were caught off guard too. As Dr. Clark said, typically we talk about a disease process, we can pull data and treatment plans from years before in the past and say, this is how it presents, this is how we treat it, and this is what we expect moving forward. We did not have that with COVID. And we were caught on our heels, and we were not being proactive, we were being reactive, trying to figure out as we went along. And that put us in a vulnerable position. And we had to figure it out as we went along. So throughout the process of dealing with the COVID pandemic, I always say the only thing certain about COVID is uncertainty. So you have to be able to move quickly and try to figure out what exactly is going on. And as Dr. Clark already mentioned, certain things we thought was correct. And then we realized, no, that's not what's going on. Now we're starting to notice these symptoms. And we think this treatment plan is going to work, but no, this treatment plan is going to work. So the last year has been such a great learning process for us. But at the same time, too, we have been able to develop some treatment plans, and we have been able to develop a vaccine. We have been able to put protocols in place to try to decrease the spread of it. So it has been a huge learning curve for us.
Dr. Wardlaw?
Yes. So in addition to the year being overwhelming, the year was a great challenge. And for us, in my 20-year career of medicine, I've never had to tell my patients, you cannot step foot into my office. We had to lock our doors. We had to transition to telemedicine, which the digital divide had also created an issue there as well, because some patients couldn't do the telemedicine visits. They didn't have the access to do the telemedicine visit. So it created a challenge all across the board. Not only did it create a challenge with telemedicine, it created a challenge with preventive medicine. We had to tell people to reschedule their colonoscopies and their pap smears and their mammograms and elective surgeries. So that also caused a challenge for us on the back end, and currently, because there are many people who are still behind on getting those preventive studies completed. So again, COVID really caused us to pivot in a manner that we were not used to. Now we have some practices. My practice is back to seeing patients in the office, except for the ones that we can't see if they've been exposed to COVID or if they can't get there. But we have made drastic changes. My waiting room, which previously housed 25 chairs, you can only have 5 people in the waiting room at one time now to allow appropriate social distancing. We have to make sure you have a mask. We have to pre-screen you with questions. Do you have a fever or you're coughing? Have you been exposed? And some patients we may have to say, well, unfortunately, we can't have you coming to the office today. We'll have to get a telemedicine visit. So we had to transition and pivot in a way that we were not accustomed to, but we have done it, and we are getting back on track here.
Janan, for the reasons that they mentioned, I think Dr. Clark said it, that they're building the plane as they're flying it. Because, and what Dr. McDonald said, that they thought this was what it was, but then they had to change how they addressed it. And even he thought it was respiratory, but then they saw it manifesting in other ways. Is that part of the drawback from the general public, and how do you see it right now? And I'll turn you loose to ask the docs questions.
Yeah, I do agree. It's ever changing and we don't know. And that's the main issue. I think people are hesitant because we are uncertain, especially when it comes to the vaccines, the disease itself. It's ever changing. And so I just think people need to do their research, and decide for themselves.
And that's why we have these wonderful doctors here now, because they are steeped. When Dr. Clark said that Detroit was hit in April and May, the hospitals were overwhelmed. I was one of those persons in the hospital, overwhelming the hospital. I was in the hospital the second time for 11 days with this disease, and I didn't have the loss of taste or smell. I didn't have a hard cough. I just had a fever that would not break. And so the questions that you would have, Janan, as it relates to what is going on with the disease, what are some of the questions that you have that our doctors can answer? And let me throw in here, please hit the share button. We have folk that are watching from South Africa. So this is going all over the world. Janan, your first question for our docs.
So the first question is, when I look at the websites of these vaccine companies, it describes their vaccine, like up here, Moderna says it is an unapproved vaccine that may prevent COVID. There's no FDA approved vaccine for COVID. Pfizer, exact same quote. And these are all from their websites. And Janssen is actually Johnson & Johnson, but it's a Janssen company. It also states it's not approved. So my question is, what does it mean when the pharmaceutical companies state it is an unapproved vaccine?
Who wants to handle that?
I'll take that.
Okay.
So when vaccines go through, these vaccines received, well, the three that we have in the United States, Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson, those vaccines have received an emergency use authorization. And emergency use authorization is requested when we need something to provide a life-saving treatment during a health crisis when there aren't any other effective options. And it has to be shown to be safe and effective. However, with the vaccines to date, there is a protocol that vaccines have to go through. And the most important protocols is to make sure that they are safe and effective, which all these trials, Moderna, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson have. All the vaccines have been proven to be effective at preventing severe disease from COVID-19, as well as preventing death. And it has also proven to be safe in regards to side effects. However, with the usual protocols, again, the vaccines itself, they were being produced. We were, again, and to use Dr. Clark's language, we were building the plane as we were driving it. So the vaccines were being produced. Then they have to be, presented to the science and the data. It's presented to the FDA, the CDC, and the immunization authorization program, who looks at the safety and the efficacy of the vaccines. However, we still have to look at the continuing effectiveness of the vaccines. We still have to look at the continuous safety profiles of the vaccines. And that's why everybody is still encouraged to make sure that if they have any side effects, they report those side effects. There is an adverse reaction reporting system that we encourage every person who received the vaccine to report to, so that everyone, the scientists, the research, the medical community, can continue to follow these vaccines to make sure that the vaccines are still effective and that they're still safe.
So to jump on her question, and Pastor McClurkin, you can jump in here anytime. Is this sort of covering yourself as a pharmaceutical to put that out that we have not been approved? I mean, it doesn't strike confidence in my heart if I go to your website and your website says that you have not been approved to stop COVID, or, you know, explain why that is there.
So I think that when you're talking about the approval process, with the pharmaceutical companies have that on their website. However, the CDC and the ACIP, which is the association that looks at the vaccine information, has reviewed all of the information to say that if the data that we have this time shows that the vaccine is safe and it is effective. So it's not just the pharmaceutical company, you have multiple levels coming in.
Okay, so we have the difference here between the CDC and the FDA.
Yes.
So somebody take a stab at that. What's the difference between the CDC and the FDA? Because they're waiting on the FDA approval. That's what her thing said. So what is the difference? Help me there.
Now, the FDA has given the approval for the emergency use authorization. So that has to be approved before the vaccine can even be distributed. So once the pharmaceutical company presents their data, they run their trials, they present their data, an outside independent organization comes in and reviews the data and gives the numbers. Okay, your vaccine is 94% effective for Moderna, 95% effective for Pfizer, 76% effective for Johnson & Johnson. So the outside organization comes in and reviews it and says, this is the effectiveness of the vaccine. Then the FDA looks at everything else, and then they're the ones who have to give the emergency use authorization at the end of the day. So if there's no emergency use authorization given, pharmaceutical companies cannot distribute the vaccine.
So then, so then you're saying that the FDA has approved these vaccines?
They have given emergency use authorization, yes. So they have to look at the data, because pharmaceutical company can come along and say, our vaccine is great. But then you need an independent source to come in and say, okay, you've given us all this data, we've looked at it. Your vaccine is not as great as we thought it would be based on the analysis, but given the information that they have and the state that we're in due to the pandemic and the loss of life, and the severe consequences we've seen from the vaccine, they have gone ahead and given emergency use authorization to push to get it moving out to the nation and to the world, actually.
So with the information, with the disclaimers that Janan posted concerning FDA, I don't know if I'm really getting a full understanding.
Can I chime in here? I'm sorry. So there's another layer that has to happen. So the emergency use authorization has been given. Then they're still under investigation, which means they still are under investigation, the pharmaceutical companies. So they're still going through the clinical trials. Then they approach the FDA with their data, and they apply for what is called a biological license application, which is a BAL. So this is the other layer that they're waiting for. Now, clinical trial studies for the vaccines for both Moderna and Pfizer, they end 2022 and 2023. So they're still under investigation until that time.
Yes, their vaccine trials go through actually 4 phases. You hear phase 1, 2, 3, but then there's a 4th phase, which is studying the vaccine after it has been distributed throughout the country or throughout the world, to look to see what continues to be the effectiveness of the vaccine, and also any other side effects that are coming along. So to your point, Janan, yes, there is that 4th phase that continues to happen. So the pharmaceutical companies, the FDA, they're always still looking at the follow-up after the vaccines have been given.
So my question to that, for the BLA, normally when vaccines are given approval, that's the first approval given, because normally we don't get an emergency use authorization. That's never been given before. So in all actuality, the BLA is the final stage of approval for a vaccine. Is that true?
So for the stage for the BLA, I can't answer with 100% certainty if that's the final stage for the vaccine, because again, we're still following, the data that's going to be going on for a few years from now. They're looking at the long-term data. But the emergency use authorization, as you said, came in for the first time because we have never seen a pandemic like this.
Mm-hmm.
This is once in a 100-year pandemic. The last pandemic we saw like this was the Spanish flu. At that particular time, and the next pandemic that'll come along will hopefully be another 100 years from now, or hopefully we will never have a pandemic, again like this. But that's why you saw the emergency use authorization come out, because within 12 months, this pandemic was able to infect over 126 million people, kill 2.7 million people across the world. In the United States alone, almost 30 million people have contracted it, and over 540,000 people have died within a 12-month period. So it had to be a bit of a speedier process to move this along. But
and the BLA,
go ahead, doctor.
I was going to say, and the BLA is kind of the final process, but it's always ongoing. Even with current medications and vaccines, we continue to analyze them. So even old medications, we continue to follow as far as for side effects, for any problems. There have been medications that have been out for years that have gotten pulled off the market because as they continue to study them, that they find that they have severe side effects or side effects that they hadn't anticipated. And the same is with the vaccine. And as Dr. Wordlow and Dr. McDonald have been saying, that with this vaccine, we're in a new phase. This is something we've never seen before. And the emergency use was given because there was nothing else to compare it to. We had no other medications. Usually we have other medications that we compare medications with and say they're superior or they're inferior to the standard of care treatment. They have no standard of care treatment for COVID. And being that this has basically ravaged the world, they needed something that they could use. And this was what we have come up with at this point. And it's gone through the same processes that all vaccines have gone through as far as the trials and things of that sort. And people think that it was rushed because it came so quickly. But you have to realize that a lot of times pharmaceutical companies are working on projects and different things, such as the process in which they came up with this vaccine for other things that they have used it for.
Well, let me say this, Dr. Clark, you just scored a point with me, and I know we're not trying to score points, but we're trying to change minds. When you said that that even though things have been approved, FDA approved, the tests still go on because things are developed over the years. I mean, when they pulled talcum powder off the shelves because it was giving cancer, I mean, who would have known? And so even though this has been an emergency use, you're going to continue to take in the data. Tell me about, if I can, Janan, to ask this question, tell me how you have seen, and I'll start with you, Dr. Clark, how have you seen the vaccine, be it Moderna, be it Pfizer, or be it Johnson & Johnson, how have you seen the vaccine transform, change, hold back the ravishing effects of this virus?
I think we're too early in the process to actually have seen a significant change with the vaccine. The vaccines are fairly new. We're just getting them to a point where we are seeing any dent being made in the statistics. And the hesitance with the vaccine, I think, is also contributing to it. The latest statistics I saw with the city of Detroit, only 7% of the population has been vaccinated. We can't gather a lot of information from that at this point. I can say that what has happened when people have gotten vaccinated and gotten fully vaccinated is there's a sense of relief from people. They realize that COVID is life-threatening, that we can't tell who or what or who's going to be affected by it and to what degree they're going to be affected by it. And we can't tell who's going to do well and who's not going to do well. I've had patients that I thought would do well, and those are the patients that ended up dying from it. Mm-hmm. I've had patients that were young patients that had no predisposed issues and have gotten severely sick from it and have passed from it. So I think as far as the impact of the vaccine, it's a little early. I think that we will see the numbers go down. I think that the vaccine, from everything that I've read on it, and I've researched both Pfizer as well as Moderna, not as much Johnson & Johnson since it's just coming out or coming on board, and I really don't have any experience with it. But have looked at them extensively, and I believe that they will make an impact.
Okay, Dr. McDonald?
Yes, from a pediatrician standpoint, someone who's been given vaccines in my office every day for the last 20 years, we know that vaccines in general are tried and true. The vaccines that have been given over the last 70 years, starting with the polio vaccine. You know, we've been giving out vaccines for 14 major diseases that we're trying to prevent severe consequences and death if you come in contact with that disease. So we do know that vaccines in general can make an impact. We saw polio eradicated from the western half of the hemisphere due to the vaccine program. We have seen just significant decreases in chickenpox. I don't want to age myself, but if you ask people, when's the last time you saw a true case of chickenpox, right? And depending, if you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, you've seen it. But if you're in your 20s, early 30s, you may not have seen a true case, and that's from the vaccine program. So we do know, and that's for other vaccines, measles, mumps, rubella. So we do know vaccines are tried and true and that they do work. However, as Dr. Clark mentioned, we're still looking at the data for COVID, but we do expect that it's going to make a significant impact.
Dr. Wardlaw?
And
Wardlaw.
Yes, sir. And when we do look at vaccines, when people are considering whether they're going to get the vaccine or not, we always want people to consider side effects of the vaccine versus complications of the disease. So we have to consider if the side effects of the vaccine, whether it's headaches, fatigue, soreness at the site, muscle aches, fevers, we have to consider, are we going to consider those side effects? Are we willing to accept those side effects? Or are we willing to accept the potential complications of COVID, which can include lung problems requiring you to go on a ventilator, heart problems, kidney problems requiring dialysis, strokes, heart attacks, and death. So we just want people to consider that the vaccine side effects cannot be worse than the complications of the disease itself. And so vaccination is an individual choice, and everyone has to determine which risk they're willing to accept.
Let me ask this to the docs, and then I'm coming back to you, Janan, and you can ask your next question. Do you three understand the hesitancy of folk that say, like Dr. Clark, you said, now Detroit, by any calculation, is anywhere between 79 and 81% African American, and yet only 7% of Blacks have been vaccinated. Do you understand, either historically or with the novelty of these vaccines, why there is hesitancy?
Yes, I definitely understand. Initially, when the vaccine came out, I had hesitance about it as well until I did my research in it. And a lot of it had to do with the history that we've had in this country as African Americans with being experimented on. And so I initially had some hesitance about it. And as I researched it and looked into it, it made me more confident in that the vaccine was legitimate, that it would work, especially speaking with the Moderna. I always tell my patients who are somewhat hesitant about it, especially African-American patients, that you have to realize that the lead scientist on the Moderna was an African-American female. And she worked with the NIH along with them to develop this vaccine. And so, you know, unlike in the past, we had some input into the manufacture and production of this vaccine, and looking at the data and looking at the different stages and how it affected people and how effective the vaccine was. So I do understand the hesitance, and you know, and it makes perfect sense.
Okay. Janan, what is your next question?
Next question is, the mRNA is part nature and part synthetic. Please explain this new technology.
Dr. Wardlow?
Yes. So messenger RNA is a technology that is used, which allows messenger RNA to be put inside of a fat particle, which is injected into your cell, and then the messenger RNA gives your cells instructions on how to make the COVID spike protein without actually seeing the virus. So then when your body sees that protein, it realizes it as an invader, as a foreigner, so it develops an immune response. It produces antibodies, so that when your body does come in contact with the true COVID protein, then it'll be prepared to use its defense system to decrease the effectiveness of the COVID virus itself. So the messenger RNA is using instructions just to give your body a blueprint of what the COVID spike protein is. It can make it, and then your body can make a defense system so that it can protect you if and when it does show up at your doorstep.
And I have to add to that this is not a new technology. The mRNA has been used in cancer treatment. It's a new technology in vaccines, but not a new technology overall. It has been used in immunotherapy for cancer treatments and a number of other things. So when people say, you know, mRNA is a new technology, I have to correct them and say, no, it's not new. It's just never been used in the production and use of vaccines. That is where it's new at.
Okay.
If I can just piggyback on what Dr. Clark just said,
Wow.
you know, the mRNA vaccine. So remember, the COVID-19 is actually SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-1 came out in the early 2000s when you were dealing, you know, with the SARS pandemic. So they had actually started working on a vaccine for that, but then it was shelved. So fast forward to 2019, 2020, COVID-19 comes about. And when they determined the genome sequence of COVID-19, then they were able to pick up on where they left off. And remember, you know, 18, 19 years had passed, technology had improved even more. So that allowed them to pick up and get the vaccine production moving even quicker.
Can I piggyback off what she just said? Yeah, for over 10 years, they've been trying to create the coronavirus vaccine. It was scrapped from my research because the animals were getting a hyperimmune response to the testing. So they had to scrap that, and they couldn't get the correct information to get it passed to become a vaccine.
What is hyperimmune response? What is that?
That's where your body, it's almost like an autoimmune disease in a regular person's body, where your body just produces more, it attacks itself, basically.
Okay.
So I'm glad you brought that up, Janan, because as you said, they may have seen some issues 10 years ago. So as we come forward to 2019, 2020, when they started the trials, they have to look at all of the potential side effects when they look at the trials. So the Moderna, the Pfizer, and the Johnson & Johnson, from what we know from the data from the trials now, we haven't seen any of that at this particular point in time.
No hyperimmune disease.
No, we don't have any documentation of that at this point.
And we are collecting data as we go.
The data is ongoing. So we want to be clear when we say things, that says for today. You know, we come based on data that we have received and we have reviewed and analyzed up until today. About 3 more months, we may have some more input for you. But
so
this
so
is
let
what
me
we're dealing
ask
with
this.
COVID.
She brought up that it was a synthetic, the RMA. When you, and help me with my novel understanding of this, but when I take the shot, if I were to take the vaccine, I am not being shot with the live virus. Is that correct?
No, that is correct. We are not injected we're not injecting any coronavirus inside of your body or any form of live virus inside of your body. You're absolutely, yep.
So do all of the vaccines sort of try to establish the same thing, and that is to have the body create its own antibody when that virus shows up in their system?
That's exactly it, Pastor. And so a way to kind of look at it is if, Pastor, you and I, we're on opposing basketball teams.
Yeah, I'd win, but go ahead.
But let me tell you, but Pastor, if I have your playbook, guess who's going to win? Me.
Yeah,
so the vaccine gives me your playbook, so that when you show up, you'll make it to the game, you'll get on the court, but you're not going to be able to score as many points because I already know how to
well, that would be because Donnie would be on my team and he's not good at basketball. But I understand what you're saying. So the vaccine inserts the playbook of the virus so that you can attack it when it comes.
Basically, what the vaccine, I explained it to people that the vaccine is encapsulated in a protein shell. And what we are injecting into you is one of the spikes of the protein shell itself, not the virus. The body will react to that protein just as it would to the virus and would develop antibodies to it without infecting you with the virus itself. So that when the virus presents itself in your body in this shell, the body recognizes that and goes into attack it.
So my question would be, Dr. Clark, and I'm sorry, Janan, for taking over your Q&A, but my question would be, how long does that protein last in the body? How long can it be effective?
That is a question that we're still looking at. That is because we've only got a year of data on this virus. Same with people who were infected with the virus and they said they had some protective immunity against it. We're not sure how long that lasts. Now I'm reading studies that say it may be 6 months, it may be 8 months. The same with the vaccine. We don't know how long we're going to have that immunity against the virus with this vaccine, whether we're going to need a booster, whether it's going to be like the flu shot where we have to get a flu shot every year. We're not sure. And that is data that we're still collecting and that we're still looking at.
Janan?
Pastor, can I just comment on the new technology and what the chief medical officer of Moderna quoted in 2017?
You are our community advocate.
So he says, we are actually hacking the software of life. The mRNA transmits the critical information from the DNA in our genes to the protein, which is really the stuff we're all made of. This is critical information that determines what the cell will do. So what we think as it is as an operating system. He says, so if we could change, if we could introduce the line of code or change the line of code, it turns out it has profound implications to everything from the flu to the cancer. And when they talk about DNA, they talk about, normally it's called the code of life. So in his own statements, he's saying we're hacking the software of life. If we could introduce a line code or change the line of code. So this new technology, because we don't have any idea what it actually will do, and of course, there's further questions, it's concerning.
Well, is your doctor there? Is he suggesting that the building blocks of our DNA is being threatened or challenged by the vaccines?
Well, the chief medical officer is from Moderna, and he's saying that this new technology will basically change the way we do medicine, is how he's quoted.
How does that sound to you docs there?
It doesn't change your DNA. It does not alter your DNA at all. That's what I want to clarify. It does not alter your DNA at all. The RNA, the messenger RNA is simply I don't want to say simply because none of this is simple, but it is a set of instructions that is given to your cells, just as Jahan said, to make that spike protein without seeing the COVID, the true COVID virus, or without being infected with the true COVID virus, but it does not affect your DNA whatsoever.
Thank
you. Go ahead, Pastor McClurkin.
No, and that's I was going to interrupt and ask us to simplify things a little more, because there's been so many conspiracy theories. There's been so much misinformation and myth that's been lauded about this vaccine and how it's going to alter the DNA and the like. So I thank you for making that simpler for everybody to understand, because the majority of people that are on the on this broadcast, we're not medical, so we don't understand all of the medical jargons, and we're still dealing with the common questions of the conspiracies that have been put out, or the misinformations. So I was just going to ask, if we could just make sure that we continue to break it down so that the people can have their fears allayed by understanding what we're saying.
We're getting I'm getting texts from folk in St. Louis, and folk are watching New Jersey and all over the world. So thank you, docs, and they're saying how wonderful you are.
Yeah.
But do we have enough data? This question was sent me. Do we have enough data to know if these vaccines are the only ones needed, or will annual boosters like the flu vaccine be required given the current mutations in Europe and in Africa? So I think you sort of answered that we don't know if there's going to be boosters, but let me hook on to that last part of that question. With the variances that are happening, be it South Africa, be it Europe, England, be it South America, do we have enough data to say that the vaccine that we're receiving now will fight those variants?
The data that we have as of today says that the vaccines is still able to fight those variants. But as always, we're still reviewing the data. The scientists are still reviewing the data to determine if in 6 months, a year, if there would have to be what we call a booster dose. Because we do know, as we've already seen with coronavirus, it has the ability, viruses change. They change to continue to protect themselves. So right now, the 3 vaccines that are out in the United States are still effective against the variants. But as always, we still have to continue to stay. We're still monitoring the data. We can't just stop and say, this is it. This is what it's going to be. We have to continue to monitor and then determine if later on there has to be a booster shot down the road, which would not be unusual. As I tell people, if you look at your child's pediatric vaccine record, none of the vaccines are one and done. They all have, they're all in a series, and most of them require some kind of booster. And the same thing with the flu. Comes every year, you have to get a new dose because that flu variant changes. So we don't have a 100% answer just yet. So the verdict is still out.
And can I just piggyback on that question?
Sure.
And the way that variants are a change in the genetic code. And there have been thousands of COVID genetic changes, but we have these very select few that have shown some significance. But the way to stop these variants from emerging is to stop the virus from replicating. And the way we need to do that is stop the number of hosts that it can continue to spread to. So that by getting as many people vaccinated as possible, by decreasing the number of hosts that are available for this virus.
Okay, let's go to our Facebook and YouTube questions. Barbara Brooks wants to know, will a mask prevent the spread? Docs?
So yeah, this is why we wear the mask. This is why we're encouraging everyone to wear the mask. So the mask has been our most effective way to prevent the spread until we get to that herd immunity where we can keep everyone, where we can get most of the population
Explain
vaccinated.
herd immunity.
So herd immunity is the where you have a significant portion of the population that's vaccinated, so you decrease disease transmission. So let me just say, if we're in a room and there's 10 of us in the room and 8 of us have been vaccinated, the likelihood of the 2 that have not been vaccinating contracting the disease has decreased significantly. As opposed to if you have 10 people in the room and 2 people have been vaccinated, now 8 people are unvaccinated, then it is highly likely that the disease, that 8 of those people will come into contact with somebody who has corona and get the disease. So that's what we mean when we say herd immunity. Yes.
Thank you. Can you talk about how the vaccine, this is from Kimberly Nod, can you talk about how the vaccine will impact people who have lupus and other autoimmune diseases? Do we have enough data for that?
I'll take that as so what we do know is that people who have autoimmune diseases, and they may be on medications that are suppressing their immune system. So again, the purpose of the virus is to boost your immune system to create antibodies to be able to defend against COVID. Well, people who have these type of conditions and their immune system may be suppressed, or they may be on medications to decrease their immune system, they may not have the robust response that we expect from vaccines. Not that it will cause a negative effect on their condition, but they may not have the significant antibody response that we expect from people whose system is not immunocompromised.
Dr. Clark, you being internal medicine, you want to add anything to that?
No, I agree 100% that it's suppression of their immune system by other medications, whether it be immune suppression or just suppression of medications that they're on for their condition. Their immune system will not respond as aggressively to the vaccine. It will still respond, but not as aggressively. It will still give them protection. And having lupus or any other autoimmune disease has not been a contraindication to them receiving the vaccine. We still encourage those people to receive the vaccine because they are at increased risk of contracting COVID, and it could be worse for them because of their immune status.
Is diabetes considered an autoimmune disease?
In some aspects, yes. If you look at we get into a conversation about the types of diabetes. There's 2 types. We basically look at type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is definitely considered an autoimmune disease that you see in younger kids. Type 2 you see in older adults. And there has been some research that it can also be somewhat of an autoimmune disease because you tend to see it in families that have autoimmune disease within the family, which we know is hereditary.
Here's another question, if I can ask this before I get to Carol Jones' question. This is about those that have allergies. And if you have a flu allergy or a bad allergic reaction to a flu vaccine, is it safe to get the COVID-19 vaccine?
It is safe to get the COVID vaccine because it's not made in the same way that the flu vaccine is.
Okay.
And the only time we are somewhat apprehensive or somewhat more cautious with the COVID vaccine are with patients who've had severe allergic reactions to other vaccines. And the only thing we do is we watch them more carefully. We watch them for a longer period of time after administering the COVID vaccine.
Okay. Carol Jones says, if you have had the COVID and have antibodies, will the shot affect you adversely?
No, the shot will not affect you adversely if you have had COVID and you have the antibodies. And what that person would has, if you had COVID, you develop the antibodies, you have natural immunity. So you do now have some immunity towards COVID, but we don't know how long that immunity actually lasts. So the verdict is still out on that. We don't know if that immunity lasts 90 days. We don't know if it lasts 180 days. We don't know if it lasts 360 days. So the recommendation to answer her first question, no, will not affect you adversely. And then the second, the second point I want to drive home is that we still recommend that you get the vaccine if you've had COVID, because we don't know how long that natural immunity will last.
Let's go to Mark Ferguson from New Jersey, New York. Can you talk about the different efficacy values for each of the three vaccines? You mentioned that one was 94, one was 92. What is efficacy, and are vaccines with higher efficacy values better than others? Great question, I think.
So efficacy is how well the vaccine works to prevent the complications of the disease and or death. And we know that the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, they had a very high efficacy, which was 94 and 95%. And we know that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has a 72% efficacy rate for contracting severe conditions, but it had 85% effectiveness against severe conditions, and almost next to 100% effectiveness rate at keeping you out of the hospital. So these vaccines are very effective. However, they are overly effective. So that's why there is some room to still be effective, even if the variants are starting to gain some steam or to gain some footage. Vaccines, typically we need them to be approximately 50 to 60% effective to get effective control of diseases.
So we got room to spare. I'm going to come back to you, our community activist. From Janet Smith, she says, what about blood thinners? I don't know what that means, if it's how it relates to the vaccine, and if you're on blood thinners. Docs, you want to handle that? And then Janan, I'm coming back to you for a question.
Well, can I say something before the
Yes.
doctors begin? When I came down with COVID, I developed blood clot. I developed blood clot off of my left artery and in my right lung. And they put me on blood thinners. And they're like, so maybe that's what they're talking about. If you're on because of that, how does the vaccine affect, or does it affect?
So we have not seen any negative effects on the vaccines on persons who are taking blood thinners, whether that's aspirin, whether that is Coumadin, whether that is Xarelto, Eliquis. We have not seen any negative impact of the vaccine on patients who are taking those medications. And in general, we do not recommend that people stop those medications to get the vaccine.
Okay.
Is it because it hasn't been long-term enough to really to see any effects? Or because the concern with people that have the underlying situations of blood clots and the Eliquis and whatever they're taking is, has there been enough time or long-term research, and there's no such thing of long-term research right now, but be able to distinguish whether it would be detrimental?
Well, I'm sorry. I think we have to distinguish between the blood clots that, like you developed, Pastor, from the COVID and being on blood thinners. One of the things that we learned from COVID as we went along is that it causes what's called a hypercoagulopathy that we didn't know initially. And that's why people were developing strokes, heart attacks, and we couldn't figure out what it was. And that is caused by the virus itself. That's why one of the new criteria when people are admitted to the hospital with COVID is that we put them on high dose anticoagulants, because we know that this is one of the things that that COVID causes. So as I said, we're learning more and more. That's different than people who are on blood thinners for, say, heart valve, or on blood thinners because they have recurrent blood clots. So that's the difference between it. So being on blood thinners is definitely not a contraindication to getting the vaccine. And the vaccine is not going to cause that.
Good, good, very good. Janan, and then I'll go to Tia.
Next question. Does RNA polymerase enzymes turn on and off genes? And this is
So
a
for the DNA the RNA polymerase is not going to turn on and off genes, but essentially what it does is that it converts some of the DNA into the RNA, which will code to a protein, which is what the vaccine is doing, to code the protein that looks like the coronavirus, so the body can mount an immune system. So it's going through a process where it's converting one thing to another thing.
So
okay, is it safe? Oh, you want to follow up on that question?
Yes, please.
Janan?
Can I follow up? So with this enzyme, it's important because it does 3 stages, or it takes place in 3 stages. According to National Library of Medicine, we're always told during this time that this RNA does not penetrate the nucleus. But according to what this enzyme does, that's exactly what it needs to do to accomplish what it needs to accomplish. So it transcribes, it goes into the nucleus, and it uses a DNA template to make the RNA molecule. During this transcription, the strand of the RNA is made and is complementary to the strand of the DNA. So the first initial thing that happens, this enzyme unwinds the DNA, and then it begins the synthesis of the RNA. So that's when the transcription begins. The second, the enzyme unwinds DNA strand, builds an RNA molecule, and then it connects to this RNA. In the termination phase, so if this termination phase doesn't take place, it says the RNA strand is completed, it detaches from the DNA. But if this enzyme makes a mistake, it can lead to serious consequences such as cancer and mutation. Can somebody clarify that?
That's what happens naturally. That's not what's happening with the vaccine. With the vaccine, we're already using mRNA with the Pfizer and the Moderna. So you're talking about the natural body processes. We're talking about the vaccination processes where mRNA, it has already been, the mRNA has already been developed to give your cells the instructions to make the spike protein. So when you are injected with COVID, the mRNA, that transcription process has already occurred. The mRNA is giving your cells instructions to make the spike protein. You're talking about natural body processes, Jahan, I believe.
If I could just clarify what Dr. Warlock just said, when you're injected with the COVID vaccine, not the COVID virus, the COVID vaccine.
Okay. And what does it mean, unwind the DNA?
So again, that is a natural process that the body goes through, and it has to make certain proteins, and it unwinds the DNA to make RNA. So this is a natural process that the body goes through. But with the vaccination process, the messenger RNA has already been established. That is what is included inside the lipid particle, which is what is injected into the body. So again, Janan is talking about natural body processes that we can't control, right? The natural body processes. But what we're talking about is the vaccination process. But the mRNA we've gotten the genetic code of COVID. So we are putting that into the mRNA so that the mRNA can give the cells instructions on how to make the protein without seeing the actual virus.
All right, let me, I think Dr. Wardlaw, you scored a point with me there. Because what you're saying is that when the molecule unravels, then if I have the vaccine, I have already in my body something that's going to build an immunity against the COVID.
Yes, the molecule, the mRNA molecule, the mRNA itself, when that is that, and I don't want to say it gives your body instructions on what to do to make the protein, right? Your body otherwise would not know what to do because it's never seen COVID before. Unless you get infected with COVID, then your body will produce a response. But our purpose in medicine is not to have everybody develop some protection by getting infected, right? We want to try to prevent that. So we want to introduce the messenger RNA so that your body can make a protein that looks like COVID without seeing COVID, right? So they can produce the antibody. So now when COVID shows up, you can handle it, and then I can beat you in that basketball game.
Okay. Is it safer? Tia Randolph wants to know, is it safer for pregnant women to get vaccinated or wait until after delivery?
That's a great question, Tia. So initially when the studies were done, typically we do a study, pregnant women are not invited to be in the study. However, some women who were in the study got pregnant during the study. So they were able to pull some data from them. And then once the vaccine started to come out, questions started to come out, well, what about us pregnant women? And what ACOG said, and that's the American Academy of Obstetricians and Gynecologists who take care of pregnant women, they recommended, one, you have a conversation with your own physician, but also you're looking at the benefit versus the risk. So the devastation of a woman, what would happen to a pregnant woman from getting COVID versus the minor side effects from the vaccine. The recommendation is after discussion with your doctor, a pregnant woman can get the vaccine.
And the reason for that is because we've seen that COVID has had devastating effects on pregnant women, causing pregnant women to get significantly ill, admitted to the ICU, experiencing death. Now we're having newborns who are born without a mother. Some patients don't even get a chance to deliver. They may have, they may go into preterm labor. So the complications of COVID on a pregnancy are very significant. So the recommendation is that the vaccine is not withheld from pregnant women, and that they should have that conversation with their doctor.
Okay. Fentry Draper wants to know what's in the vaccine.
The vaccine is basically the mRNA that we've been speaking about, and the mRNA needs what's called like a vector or something to carry it into the cells. And the Moderna and Pfizer use a fat globulin in which they embed the mRNA and inject it into you. And so that's basically what is in the vaccine. There aren't any microchips or anything like that. I tell people when they ask, are they tracking me? Are they putting microchips? The smallest microchip that we have been able to develop is about the size of a grain of rice. And if you look at the needles that we're using to give you the vaccine, a grain of rice is not going to fit into that or be able to be injected into you. Okay.
And can I follow up with Dr. Clark? When we talk about vaccine ingredients, vaccines in general, the ingredients are to do three things. One, to allow immunity. Two, to protect the integrity of the vaccine, to make sure that the vaccine can stay effective, and at certain temperatures and when it's being transported and things of that nature. So you also have things in there. The messenger RNA and the lipids is, those are the newer ingredients that are put in the newer vaccines. But you also have salts to help maintain the integrity of the vaccine. You have sugars to help protect the molecule, when they're frozen and you have to thaw them out. Then you have stabilizers to keep them effective during storage and transport. So those are the journal other ingredients that are in vaccines.
Can you, I'm
go ahead.
sorry,
Go
can
ahead.
you address some concerns that their fetal cell lines are being used for not so much the mRNA, but they were used in the testing for the mRNA, but they are used in the Johnson & Johnson. Can you address that, please?
I will address that. So fetal cells were used. They took fetal cells from two terminations in the 1960s for certain vaccines such as chickenpox and rubella, hepatitis A. So it was from two terminations in the 1960s, but with science, you can continue to replicate those cells over and over and over again. So there has not been any use of cells from any recent terminations.
Okay. It is hard to believe that we have been on this conversation for over an hour. Grace Davis, should children get the vaccine? We know that they're saying it's 16 and up now, I know in Detroit, but that's what they're saying. Should younger children get the vaccine, or they're
Once the vaccine is again proven to be safe and effective in children, it will be recommended that children get the vaccine also.
But right now that recommendation hasn't happened.
Right now that recommendation hasn't happened. Now they're doing trials currently on children down as young as 6 months of age. But what we can never do is assume that because it worked in the adults, it's going to work just as well in children. Children are not little adults, so we need that data to back it up before we recommend it for children.
I'm going to, I appreciate you all giving us your time here. I'm going to start with you, Janan Healey. And what I'm going to ask is that you give us your closing statements, okay? And I'll go from you, Janan, to Dr. Elena, and then I'll go to Dr. Clark, and then I'll end up with the younger twin, Dr. Wordlaw. And you can give us your closing statements and remarks as to where you feel, and then I'll go to Pastor McClurkin. Janan Healey.
Thank you for having me. I just wanted to say again, it is unknown, just like the doctors have said. We don't know how effective these vaccines are to the new variances. These vaccines were produced within 5 months last year and manufactured the same time. And I just believe that because we have a 98% survival rate of COVID, that taking the chance of the unknown is, we just have to be very careful.
There's a 98% survival rate?
From the people, the death rates compared to the population of the US, yes.
Okay, all right. Dr. Elena McDonald.
I want to thank everyone for taking the time to come and get accurate information to help them make a decision that was best for their family and themselves and their friends. But what I want people to realize is that COVID-19 has shown us and continues to show us how deadly this virus is. It is killing us at 3 times the rate of other ethnic groups. This virus is not across the world. It is in our homes, it's in our schools, it's in our churches, it's in our places of work. 2020 was a complete wash. We lost all of the normal things that we used to do. So while we have some things in place that have been effective, the mask, the social distancing, the hand wash is just simply not enough. Over 500,000 of us have died from this disease. So the vaccine is the next appropriate step to consider if we want to go back to some sense of normalcy. We want to send our children back to school, college campuses, hug our grandparents, have Easter dinner, go back to church, be able to sing, have a great time, sporting events. This is the next appropriate step that we should consider to get back to a sense of normalcy and get to the other side of this pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Clark.
First, I want to say thank you for inviting me. And I have to say that I believe in the vaccine, that I agree with the vaccine. I've had the vaccine. I've taken it myself. I initially had some hesitancy, but after looking at the research, and I always tell patients to talk with your family, talk with your doctor, talk with people that you trust. And I look at it as another way, as I tell them that we have, on one hand, we have over 500,000 people that have died from it. And on the other hand, we have a vaccine where they say 197 people died after taking the vaccine. And it hasn't been directly proven to be secondary to the vaccine. That the odds are in your favor to take the vaccine, and that I'd rather go against the 500,000 that have died from it. And those are real numbers. I've seen these patients. I've seen people, I've known patients. I've known people, I've known relatives that have passed from COVID. And that you need to look at every option. You need to look at what we have available to protect you. And again, we do want to get back to some normalcy. We want to be able to gather as a family. We want to be able to gather as church members. We want to be able to go to different places that we've been isolated from. But again, thank you for inviting me to the forum. And I, again, look forward to answering anybody's questions.
Dr. Delana.
Yes. So I will say, yes, I believe in the science. I believe in the vaccine. The vaccines have been shown to be effective. The vaccines, we have short-term data. We have short-term side effects. We do know that the vaccine is effective at decreasing severe complications and decreasing deaths. Now, we do know that you can still get COVID if you have the vaccine. But as we talked about with that basketball game, if I have your playbook, it will still allow me to win the game. I won't develop severe complications and or death. We do know that COVID is killing people every day. So we have to make sure that we are looking at which risks are we willing to take. No, we don't have the long-term side effects of the vaccine just yet because the calendar is not on our side. We have to do something now to prevent these astronomical deaths that we are experiencing. So again, the vaccine has been shown to be effective. The short-term side effects, we have not seen significant short-term side effects from the vaccine. Yes, we are still looking at the long-term side effects. We're still monitoring the effectiveness of the vaccine. We're still monitoring any side effects. We encourage people to report their side effects of the vaccine. We're monitoring the variants. That's what science is about. We may have to get a booster dose. We may have to get an annual dose. That data is being reviewed and stay tuned. But again, we have to have something in place that is going to address the elephant in the room now, the COVID that is killing us now, that is taking our family members away now.
Thank you. Let me say, I did not say this purposely at the beginning of our conversation, but let me say to all that are watching that our doctors, along with our advocate, are people of faith. They all believe in God. They all believe, I really enjoyed talking with Dr. Clark, talking about how he tells his patients, pray for me, pray, and the twins there, I know where they come from, but and we praise God just for their willingness, and this is part of the forum, is that science and God, faith, and the belief in medicine is not diametrically opposed, that we are not mutually exclusive, and so to have doctors that are in their profession that say, hey, I practice medicine, but I believe in God, should offer you some sense of relief and take away some of your anxiety. Pastor Donnie McClurkin, yes. I am waiting with itching ears to hear your comment and your closing statement.
Well, as we were having this wonderful meeting, and I thank the doctors and our advocate for such information that is so very vital. Everything that we do, the Bible says that God doesn't want us to be ignorant. And in everything that we do, we need to have information that will help us make decisions that, and especially in this case, that are life preserving. Information that will preserve our lives. As we were going forth, I was reading a lot of the comments, and then I remembered, excuse me if you're not from the Black culture, but I remember our culture. Our culture, we are self-appointed doctors. Our opinions are just as valid to us as the shingles that hang on the walls of the doctors. We've got opinions that we give to people that may be detrimental. We've got opinions that we have that may be wrong and shorten our lives. We got to remember that we've got these experts on for that specific reason, to give us the medical and the medical opinions and the medical discoveries that can help us make decisions. We have Janan on as an advocate to voice the concerns of the people and to ask the pertinent questions so that they can be addressed and answered. And it's very important that we do not come to our own conclusions based on sound bites, but that we come to the conclusions based on the information that's given by experts. These are people who are well-versed, and we need to take credence in what they're saying. We need to believe and really do our research based on what they've divulged today, and not based on our myths and not based on our uneducated opinions. We have a very dire situation that cannot be solved by what we believe or what we think. We must know. And based on that knowledge, we will preserve our lives and go forward. I have been enlightened in a way that I cannot even describe, because my prior opinion was, a little negative. But this has given me information where I can literally make a decision, an educated decision, with information that I did not have before. So I admonish everyone, please lay aside your honorary degrees and hear the voice of these Christian, medical, scientific, and experts, as well as our advocate, that can help us make a decision that could save our families' lives.
I want to say again, I appreciate what I've learned, and you have moved me, doctors, you have moved me closer to rolling up my sleeve. And I say that sincerely. I mean, my whole thing was, no, I'm gonna let y'all go on and do that. But in what I've heard today, you've really made me think.
Yes.
And part of the Bible says this, in all of thy getting, get an understanding. And you have made me understand better what this is to do. Understanding that it is not a panacea. It is not a do-all, that we are in the process of finding something that could battle this. I think that Janan's questions were spot on. Yeah. Some of them might have been a little too technical for me and a couple of other people, but Dr. Delana got with her. And so we understand what happened here. So I want to thank you, and y'all pray for me. Why don't we just all pray right now? Father, in the name of the Lord Jesus, your word is right, your grace is sufficient, and your strength is enough. You told us that we are to acknowledge you in all of our ways, yes, and that you would direct our path. We thank you for each of these doctors. We thank you for Sister Healey, yes, and for Pastor McClurkin. We thank you for all that have joined us in this conversation and what they've heard. And we pray, first of all, we come against this COVID virus, We pray that your word would be found in the mouths of the believers. For your word says, if my people, which are called by my name, would humble themselves and pray, seek my face, turn from their wicked ways, and you would heal the land. We want you to forgive our sins and heal our land. And Father, I pray that you would give wisdom to these doctors, those that are creating the vaccines, that they would have something that would pertain to life in the name of the Lord Jesus. Give us to make the decisions necessary that we might understand that you care for us, that our physicians care for us. For Jesus said, the whole need not a physician, meaning that there is a place in our lives for our physicians. So we listen and we believe your word. Bless these doctors. Bless all that are watching. In Jesus' name,
Yes.
amen.
Amen.
All right, you can loose your things and say bye to everybody. I want to appreciate you, Dr. Clark. I'm coming to see you, Dr. Clark.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Word. Well, let me talk to Dr. McDonald first. Hi, I'm Dr. McDonald. You gotta take your unmute yourself. There
Yes.
we go.
Yes.
You all right?
I'm perfect. I'm perfect. I am just happy we had the opportunity to have this discussion.
Yes, thank you, Bishop Brown.
See, isn't it wonderful to be with someone as well known as Dr. McClurkin? I mean, Pastor McClurkin.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
I'm telling you can tell them.
Don't humor it. Don't
Put
humor
that on your resume. A panel with Pastor McClurkin. That'll do it.
Right.
I'm writing that down now.
Dr. Delana.
I would like to say thank you for having us. And I would like to say full disclosure, I did have my vaccine as well. I don't have years. Yes. Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
And I had mine also. I had Moderna.
Okay.
Yes.
And they're living to tell it.
Yes.
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 Thank you all. God bless you. I love you. And if we need to do a follow-up, I know who to call.
Yes.
Okay.
We're
Yes.
here.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
So much.
Bye.
Bye.